What is up, everyone? Welcome to the podcast, the Fourth Sector F1 podcast, hosted by yours truly. The 2026 Monaco Grand Prix ended up being one of the most eventful races we've seen all season. Going into the weekend, people expected Monaco to be delivered by qualifying. That's normally how things work. However, track position is king, overtaking is difficult, and once a race settles down, it often becomes a strategic battle. Instead, we got reliability failures, multiple penalties, pit lane speeding incidents, two safety cars, a red flag, and one of the biggest championship swings of the season. And while all of this was happening, Kimi Antonelli continued his incredible run of form and left Monaco with another victory. So let's break down everything that happened. Antonelli continued to look like the driver to beat. Let's start with the winner. Antonelli came into Monaco already leaving the championship and carrying a lot of momentum after 4 wins in a row. Monaco was always going to be difficult, to be an important test. Monaco was always going to be an important test because the circuit challenges drivers differently from what he's seen before. Raw pace helps, but precision is everything. One small mistake can end your race instantly. What impressed me about Kimi Antonelli wasn't necessarily his outright speed, it was how clean the entire weekend was. Pole on Saturday and a strong start Sunday. No massive mistakes. No panic during the safety cars. No issue during the restart after the red flag. Every time Monaco threw something at him, he handled it perfectly. We've seen plenty of young drivers show speed in Formula One, however, nothing like this. What separates championship contenders from everyone else is consistency, and right now, Antonelli is showing everything. The result was another victory and another extension of his championship lead. But while Antonelli was having one of the strongest weekends of the season, several of his rivals had a nightmare. The biggest story from the championship perspective has to be Max. Coming into Monaco, Max needed a strong weekend. Antonelli had been building momentum for weeks, and Red Bull needed to stop that trend continuing. Starting second on the grid gave Verstappen a genuine chance. At Monaco, qualifying position is often more important than race pace. Starting on the front row meant he could pressure Antonelli through strategy, restarts, or potentially even challenge him at the race start. Instead, the race was effectively over before it really begun. Almost immediately after lights out on the formation lap, Verstappen was reporting issues with the car. On the race start, absolute anti-stall. The team quickly realized they had a serious problem, and before long, his race was over. The power unit issue forced an early retirement and turned what should have been a major point-scoring opportunity into a complete disaster. And that's what makes his result so damaging. It's not simply that Verstappen retired. It's not that he retired on the day that Antonelli won. If Antonelli had finished 4th or 5th, the damage would have been manageable. Instead, Verstappen scored 0 points, while his biggest championship rival took maximum points. That's the sort of weekend that can change the direction of an entire season. The other concern for Red Bull is that their reliability hasn't exactly been perfect this year. When fighting against a driver who's consistently finishing races, consistently scoring heavy, every retirement comes more costly. You can't afford DNFs when the championship leader is standing on the top step of the podium. And Monaco might end up being remembered as one of the key turning points in his championship battle. While Verstappen's retirement dominated the headlines, it wasn't a particularly enjoyable weekend for Hadjar either. The Racing Bulls driver nearly the Red Bull driver never looked comfortable throughout the weekend. Monaco is one of those circuits where confidence is everything. Drivers need complete trust in the car because they're spending the entire lap millimeters from the barriers. If the balance isn't right, lap times will disappear very quickly. Throughout practice, qualifying, and the race itself, Hadjar seemed to be fighting the car more than attacking the circuit. The pace wasn't where the team expected it to be, and opportunities to move forward were limited. For Red Bull, Monaco felt like a weekend where they never quite managed to put everything together. When you combine that with Verstappen's retirement, it was a difficult weekend overall for the wider Red Bull family. Monaco isn't usually the first circuit people think about when discussing reliability. When people talk about reliability concerns, they often think about circuits such as Monza, Spa, or Jeddah, where cars spend huge amounts of time at full throttle. But Monaco creates a completely different set of challenges. Cars spending most of their lap accelerating, then braking. Gearboxes constantly ticking over. Cooling comes difficult. Drivers spend long periods of time in running traffic. And when a race includes safety cars and red flags, teams constantly changing how they manage their systems. Verstappen wasn't the only driver affected. Several teams reported technical concerns throughout the weekend, and Lando Norris was another notable retirement. For McLaren, losing Norris was frustrating because there was valuable points available that had just gone. The race became a reminder that reliability still plays a major role in the modern Formula One world. Sometimes the fastest car isn't the one that wins. Sometimes simply making it to the finish line becomes an achievement. One of the more odd stories from the Monaco GP was the number of pit lane speeding incidents. Normally, pit lane speeding isn't something we spend much time talking about. Teams have systems designed to prevent it. Drivers practice pit entries repeatedly throughout the weekend. It's usually straightforward and easy, but Monaco proved different. Several drivers caught exceeding the speed limit and immediately found themselves under investigation for 5-second penalties. At most circuits, a small penalty can be recovered through strategy or overtaking, but Monaco isn't like them. Track position is simply too important. A 5-second penalty around Monaco often has a much bigger impact than it would at other circuits. Once you're stuck behind another car, making up time becomes incredibly difficult. Just ask George. That's why these penalties ended up having such a massive influence on the final result. Hadjar getting to P3, Piastri P4, both Racing Bulls in the points. What makes the situation particularly surprising is that these weren't aggressive strategic gambles. These were operational mistakes. And when championships are decided by small margins, mistakes can become extremely expensive. Unfortunately for Mercedes, George Russell has become another victim of those mistakes. Going into Monaco, Russell needed a strong result after not scoring in Canada. Antonelli kept extending his championship lead, and Merck needed both cars scoring heavily to win. Initially, things looked relatively good for George. The pace wasn't great, but points were still on the table. Then the first problem arrived. Russell caught speeding in the pit lane, receiving a 5-second penalty early on during the weekend. That alone wasn't ideal, but it wasn't race ending either. The issue was for him before this, he was stuck behind Hadjar since the opening laps. Hadjar, a very quick driver, getting on the podium. However, he had a massive engine problem. It meant his speed was so far off the speed of Antonelli and the Ferraris, continually pushing Russell backwards. Drivers have recovered from worse situations. However, the real damage came afterwards. During the safety car, Merck failed to correctly serve the penalty during the pit stop sequence, aka not at all, which is illegal. The mistake resulted in Russell receiving a drive-through penalty at the end of the race. At Monaco, that's about as bad as it gets. A drive-through penalty costs a huge amount of time, and because of overtaking so difficult, recovering those positions was just impossible. What makes the situation more frustrating for Mercedes is that those weren't unavoidable circumstances. It wasn't bad luck or a mechanical issue or another driver causing a collision. They could have avoided it. And that's what hurts the most when you're fighting for championships. At the end of the season, teams often look back at races and identify moments where points were lost. Monaco is likely going to be becoming one of those for many teams, including Russell and Mercedes. For so much of the opening phase, the race was straightforward. Couple of DNS, but no safety cars, unlike normal. Antonelli was miles ahead of the pack, lapping everyone just about. Teams were managing tyres, drivers focused on strategy. But then, of course, it was Lance Stroll crashing straight into the barrier, reporting some big failures. However, many commentators seem to think that it was the marbling and the wear of that new tarmac that had been laid before the race. The first safety car appeared. Immediately, the entire race changed. Antonelli's gap shattered. Strategies were changed. Everyone coming into the pits. Drivers who had spent the previous laps managing tyres found themselves preparing for a restart. One of them being Oscar Piastri, waiting so long to come into the pits, and then that advantage of fresh tyres absolutely shattered when everyone came in. At Monaco, restarts are often one of the few realistic opportunities to gain positions. That increases the pressure, and pressure leads to incidents. One of the most disappointing moments of the afternoon involved Charles Leclerc. The Monaco man brought extra pressure on himself as it was his home race and he just extended his contract. The expectations were massive and the fans were ready for a good result. Unfortunately, at the end of that first safety car, Leclerc found him in the wall the same way Stroll found himself in the wall. Reporting braking issues, blaming it on himself. Again, the commentators believed that it was the track issues that caused it. The incident ended his race and triggered another interruption. For Ferrari, it was a major missed opportunity. Points lost just like that. A double podium gone before they could even touch it. Leclerc's accident brought out another safety car. At that point, the race had already become too difficult to predict. Then the biggest twist of the day. The red flag brought out for the first time following track damage that caused some of those incidents. This completely reset the event. Teams had become reassessing. Teams came to reassessing strategies, drivers regrouping, lap drivers getting unlapped. Tires could be changed, penalties could be served. The race effectively received a second start, a great opportunity for overtakings around the tight track. Nobody knew what was going on, where drivers were, or what was about to happen. This made it even more magical. When the race resumed, all eyes were on the leader. A Monaco restart after red flag creates enormous pressure. One poor launch costs the victory. One mistake erases the whole race. But Antonelli, the 19-year-old, handled it exactly as he had handled every other challenge throughout the weekend. The restart was clean, the lead was gained back, the pressure absorbed, and from that point, he controlled the race all the way to the finish. Probably one of the biggest takeaways from Monaco. Not that just Antonelli won, but he won, but how he won. Every challenge was handled correctly, every opportunity for mistakes were avoided, and that's exactly what World Championships winners do. The Monaco GP ended up being much more than the winner. Verstappen's retirement caused a major championship swing. Russell losing 25 valuable points through operational mistakes. Many teams with engine difficulties, pit lane speeding penalties. Something must have been going on because so many people getting so many penalties was just so odd. However, through the safety cars, the red flags, the penalties, Antonelli was delivering. We're now reaching the stage of the season where patterns start to emerge, and the biggest pattern right now is Antonelli continuing to maximize every opportunity while his rivals leave points on the table. 5 wins in a row and more to come. If this trend continues, the championship battle instantly becomes very difficult for everyone else. And that's why Monaco may end up being remembered as one of the most important races of this 2026 season. If you enjoyed this Monaco GP review, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and let me know your thoughts in the comments. Do you think Antonelli is the clear title favourite, or can Russell, Verstappen, and even Hamilton fight back the massive margin? And if you enjoy career mode content, check out my latest driver career episode after this video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.